Welcome home. We are WNST, AM 1570, Towson, Baltimore. We call ourselves Baltimore Positive. You can find us anywhere on the internet, but if you're out in the radio world, set a little spot. Reach down right now on your dash and just say, I can be number 6. I don't need to be number 2, number 1. You can leave 98 Rock, BAL. Do what I do. Put the Bay on number 1. I'm on number 6 on my own dial. So do that. Also, meet me down for the Fells Point Oyster Festival this weekend. We're going to be at Cooper's on Friday in the afternoon from about 11 to 3. Springsteen's in town. Styx is in town. I've got Nils Lofgren on the air from the E Street Band. I've got Lawrence Gowan from Styx on the air. We had a big football game on Sunday. Maryland Lottery's giving me the Gold Rush Sevens doublers, but also I'm going to have the Ravens scratch-offs for the first time on Friday. Crab Cake Tour moves around. I got Costas. I believe that is – let me get the dates out here for everybody because everybody wants to know what's going on. Next Friday, Fadley's the 20th. We're going to be at State Fair on the 24th in the afternoon with Angela Alsterbooks. We're going to be at Costas on the 27th, and then we're going to be at Pizza John's, which is Luke's favorite place for our birthday. His birthday's in early October. Mine's in mid-October. Mine's closer to Jim Palmer and Sammy Hagar's than his, so I feel better about that. Luke Jones joins us now. I always call them the Oakland Raiders, dude. I messed that up. I'm going to do that with Brick when he comes on, too, because they'll always be the Oakland Raiders to me. I never got used to calling them Los Angeles Raiders, even when they were giving Joe Theismann a hard time and Marcus Allen was running around. But here come the Raiders, and boy, you said to me in the Orioles segment, you got all flippant with me after another Orioles loss. They better win on Sunday. And you sort of sound like my dad or maybe even your dad.
Well, I mean, they're a big favorite. Vegas, and I don't mean the football team, but the sports books certainly think the Ravens are going to win.
I've lived long enough for you to use that. That's pretty good.
Yeah,
That's pretty
there
good.
you go. There you go.
Yeah.
I don't mean the football team, but I mean, look, this is a way better team on paper than the Las Vegas Raiders, but you've got to go out and play well. And I think if nothing else this week, you do get a reminder that Gardner Minshew was the quarterback of the Indianapolis Colts who came into Baltimore early last season. And if you watch that game, it wasn't much of what he did, but a reminder of if you come out and you don't play your best football and you turn the ball over and you make silly mistakes, like from a fair catch on a kickoff, for example, in a clock management situation where they left time on the clock when they didn't need to, you do things like that, you can certainly get beat. And I think, having had an opportunity to watch the Raiders, I watched the condensed game replay of the Raiders going up against the Chargers. J.K. Dobbins had that big day, right? Good for him. Hope he can stay healthy because I think we know here in Baltimore that he's talented, but the injuries just completely derailed his time here. But if you kind of look at that game, their defense basically gave up 3 big plays and was pretty darn good other than that. Now, of course, those 3 plays count. And when you have bad run fits or you miss tackles, then, yeah, the Ravens, whether it's Lamar Jackson or Derrick Henry or Justice Hill, they'll make you pay in that regard. But my point is, if you watch that game, at least defensively, now offensively, okay, they have Devontae Adams. They do have 2 good young tight ends, but that's not an overly impressive offensive unit, an offensive system there. But defensively, it's a pretty talented front. And they've added Christian Wilkins, Max Crosby, of course, it can be is an absolute game wrecker. They have Robert Spillane, who off-ball linebacker previously with the Steelers. He played well on Sunday against the Chargers. They've got a decent front 7. So I
that
think
worries me for them. I mean, you
sure.
say game wrecker. Game wrecker. We had one of those last week, and I didn't wreck the game, but it didn't help the game. And I think this offensive line, smart defensive coordinators are going to identify things, and they're going to find who's the weak guy. Remember the old Billick thing? Let's pick on that little cornerback. Literally, that's how they're going to go about this until you figure it out. You got Justice Hill blocking Max Crosby with the game on the line. Crazy.
Yeah, and I think this is going to be a different kind of front than what they saw against Kansas City, which, Chris Jones moved all around. We know what he did. But the Chiefs, something that was kind of lost because we talked about this leading up to the season opener, but the Chiefs ended up not actually blitzing all that much in that game when that was something that we kind of expected because they had done more of that against Lamar in the past. But I think with this team, I think the Raiders will be a little more inclined to blitz a little bit more. Again, using a small sample and one game against the Chargers. I mean, none of these teams are. Can we say that there are tendencies yet, right? I mean, it's one data point to kind of look at, especially when you talk about teams that have new coaching staffs or changes at the coordinator spots. But I think it's a Raiders team that will pose some challenges with this offensive line. It should be a good test. Jim Harbaugh, in his post-game speech, any coach will tell you that improvement from week 1 to week 2 is usually, I don't know if I'd agree with the assessment that it's the biggest jump you'll make, but I think it can be very telling, good or bad, in terms of what you look like in week 1 and then what week 2 looks like, especially talking about young players. And we're talking about young players on this Ravens offensive line. So, that to me is the potential. That's the potential. If the Ravens are struggling in this game and it's the tie game late in the third quarter, something along those lines, I'm guessing a big reason why will be that Raiders front giving the Ravens offensive line problems. So the test is to start fast, get yourself an early lead, which they technically had against the Chiefs, but that was pretty fleeting, of course, and be able to lean into your running game. I mean, the Ravens, I saw a great stat. I can't remember the specifics off the top of my head, but I saw Sharp Football noted how many plays the Ravens ran last week trailing. And Nestor, the number of plays they ran last week trailing was an overwhelming percentage of the number of total plays they trailed last season in the regular season. Think about it. That Colts game, they lost at the very end. That Steelers game, they lost. Not the second one, the first one that actually counted. They lost that at the very end. The Browns game that they lost when Watson had the really good second half and they lost at the very end, right? This was not a football team that trailed very much at all last year. So right off the bat, and again, it's Kansas City. I'm not drawing some damning conclusion about them. It was just an observation that
you can't play from behind unless you're playing from behind, right? Literally, like they were that good that they played from ahead, that they didn't have to think about playing from behind, that's Lamar ball. And you gave me this lean into the running game. I mean, I've talked about it has to work for you to lean into it. Otherwise
you've got to have a lead.
Yeah.
You've got to have a lead. I mean, anyone will tell you, and this is why I keep saying that they've got to be good with their passing game has to be good. The idea was not to acquire Derrick Henry and then you go back to how you played football in 2018. That's not the point. And John Harbaugh even said that this week. They didn't sign Derrick Henry to give him the ball 30 times every week. I mean, you're not winning football games consistently in the NFL in this day and age doing that. Now, what you can do and what we have seen, and this is really, again, what was so lost in what happened in the title game last year was people fundamentally not really recognizing what the Ravens' makeup truly was last year. I said this over and over, and I know people don't want to hear it because they'd rather just yell at the coaching staff, right? They didn't run the ball enough. And I'm not saying they shouldn't have run the ball more. However, when you looked at the Ravens' passing rate last year in early down, game neutral situations. So what that means is talking first and second down and talking about games in which you're either ahead by 7 or trailing by 7, right? Talking about close games here. Early downs, close games. The Ravens had one of the higher passing rates in the NFL in those instances last year. The reason why they ended up having such robust rushing totals is they led games because they were so much better than most opponents. And in the second half, then they ran the heck out of the football. So in order for that formula to work, you've got to have a lead. So they didn't have that in the AFC title game. They didn't have that very much, other than after the first drive last Thursday night. So, that to fully maximize the Derrick Henry thing, don't get me wrong, that doesn't mean you don't run the ball at all in the first half. I'm not suggesting that. But to truly maximize things in the modern game, you run to protect the lead, right? You pass to get the lead and you run to protect it. I mean, that's really what it's about. And that's, the Ravens have obviously 4 or 5 years ago, they were much run heavier than they are now, but they're still run heavy relative to most teams out there. But again, it's recognizing game situation. And yeah, the Ravens last year, they were aggressive throwing the football early in games in early down situations. Analytics will tell you The formula is not run the ball on first down, run the ball on second down, throw it on third. That was kind of the way it was done 30 plus years ago in the National Football League. The most efficient way to do things, and of course, this is assuming you have to have a decent passing game to do it, is actually to throw the ball on first down, get yourself in second and short, and then you run in second and short. Or if you throw an incompletion, throw it again, and then you run in third and short, right? Teams get too cute trying to throw the ball in third and short when the analytics fully support run the ball in third and short. So, my point is the Ravens last year did throw the ball a whole lot in early down situations in close games early on, and then they got the lead, and then that's when they'd hammer it with Gus Edwards and Justice Hill and all that. So, you want to if you get an early lead against this Raiders team that, like I said, their overall success rate on defense was actually pretty good last week, but they gave up a few really big chunk plays that were the difference in the game. If you can get an early lead on them, get yourself in a position where you're up 10 points, then I think Derrick Henry can have a huge day, because the Raiders, as much as they might have stopped the Chargers' run for stretches of that game, inevitably they missed a tackle or they had a poor run fit. And, the difference here is if that happens against Derrick Henry, I don't think they're catching him. J.K. Dobbins, they were able to run down. And, we kind of talked about that with Dobbins a couple years ago. Is that because of his knee injury? Does he not have that highest gear, whatever? But Derrick Henry, if he gets a full head of steam, no one catches him, right? I mean, it takes him a little while to get going speed-wise, but once he gets to the outside, if he busts one tackle and he's in the open field, then, he's gone. That's how fast he still is. So, I think for the Ravens, it's, this to me is a game that shouldn't be all that complicated in terms of your formula for trying to win. Against the Chiefs, you go into that knowing you need to play great football. I don't think the Ravens need to play great football to play this game, but it needs to be clean, competent, good, rock solid football. And if they do that, and they do that on both sides, all three phases, but specifically offensively and defensively, and you clean up some of the miscommunications and blown assignments on the defensive side, against an offense that, respect for Devontae Adams aside, doesn't have a whole lot that scares you. They shouldn't have too much trouble winning this football game. But you kick the ball around, or your offensive line, doesn't have its protections in order, all those different things that can potentially happen where, you give up a return in special teams, something like that, then yeah, this could be a close game in the fourth quarter. When you're 0-1, you can't be thinking about anything as a layup until you go out and you could say, well, they blew teams out last year. Well, that's last year.
Let's play a good game. I'm with you.
Yeah.
Play a good game.
Yeah.
Right.
It doesn't have to be perfect, but you've got to go out and play your game. No question.
You mentioned things that get the ship blown up. I wrote my Eric DaCosta letter this week that I wasn't in the locker room out in Las Vegas, or Las Vegas, what am I saying, in Kansas City. Was nice to see the new locker rooms there, by the way, because that place was always a dump underneath until they fixed it all up. And not there to ask Marlon Humphrey what happened on the play. 3 days later, Kyle Hamilton stands in front of all of you and offers that, my bad, right? These are the guys you're counting on to not make those mistakes, right? They cost you games, where the miscommunications between Marlon Humphrey, your highest paid player, and Kyle Hamilton, you think is your best player. Roquan Smith, I'll make an argument for all these guys because they have a very good cast of players. That's why we expect them to win. That's why they're a 9-point favorite, down from 9.5. But Kyle Hamilton, I'm on the outside. I don't know. You have to tell me the tenor of all of it. You're there, standing there, but he seems to be a grown up. I've never met the kid. I have met his father.
Well, it's why, me, Nestor. I'm not Mr. Hot Take, right? Or I certainly hope people don't think that, because I try to be thoughtful, and I try to, if I tell you I'm not sure about something, if I tell you I'm on the fence about something, which doesn't always make for the most compelling radio take, but I want to be honest. I've said to you that I think Kyle Hamilton has the potential. And part of that is accountability, right? Part of that is leadership as a young man who's 23 years old. I mean, he's still, he's Gunnar Henderson in terms of age, right? I mean, that's what you're talking about right there. Adley Rutschman's a couple years older when you're talking about young players in Baltimore sports landscape. But, part of that accountability and part of that maturity in addition to just the unbelievable talent and skill set and his ability to play 5 or 6 different positions on the football field for a defense, is why I've said to you that I think Kyle Hamilton, it's a long path. Let's be clear. And I'm not saying he's anywhere close to that or even will be in the next 2 or 3 years, but I think there's a pathway for Kyle Hamilton if what we've seen through 2 years, which is him becoming a first team all pro safety last year, and how young he is, the maturity, the ability, all those different things, I think he's got an opportunity to be one of the 3 or 4 best defensive players in the history of this franchise. That's how highly I think of Kyle Hamilton. So look, what happened? Ed Reed busted coverages before. Ray Lewis missed tackles in his career. We always think about these guys in the past tense of like they were infallible. No, Ed Reed gambled and lost, and sometimes guessed and left a corner out high and dry at times. It happens.
Let me imitate Brian. No, Ed, no.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right. I mean, we can remember Ed Reed trying to lateral ball, and okay, for every time it worked, there was a time where it potentially landed on the ground, and you're trying to get it back. So
yeah, you don't tell Ed Reed to get down.
Yeah. So the point I'm trying to make, Hamilton showing accountability there, and I think as people reviewed that more and more, I think you could kind of say, and it looked like they were. Marlon Humphrey definitely played that looking like it was a too high safety look. And, and you kind of look at how everyone else was playing their coverage. That's what I started to think it was, but it was nice to get that confirmation. And what I was impressed by was when he said it, he made clear, he said, not just it wasn't Marlon Humphrey, he also stood up for his coach and said that wasn't on Zach Orr at all. It wasn't like that was a bad, I messed up. I needed to be back and I wasn't. And I take ownership of that. And he went on to say that he didn't play a very good football game, which I said to you, when we were breaking down the aftermath of the loss to the Chiefs, that I'm not sure you'll find a football game where both Roquan Smith and Kyle Hamilton play as poorly as they did against the Chiefs. Now, okay, that's frustrating because it's the Chiefs and that's the team you're chasing. And that's the team that if you want to get there and break through in January, you're probably going to see them at some point in time, right? So, but at the same time, that to me, there's a certain level of encouraging, an encouraging reality that I don't think Roquan Smith is going to play that poorly moving forward. I don't think Kyle Hamilton's going to play that poorly moving forward. And they still almost, had a chance that they potentially could have beaten the Chiefs at the end. So to me, it's a case where you're looking at the upside and you say, Roquan will be better. He's going to bounce back. Kyle Hamilton will certainly bounce back. I think their defense, and I talked about this before week 1. Go back and look at Mike McDonald's defense, his first year, the first 6, 7, 8 weeks of the season. They had some hiccups. They had some breakdowns. When you do, and I asked Hamilton about this on Wednesday, when you do as much pre-snap as they do, whether it's, looking like they're going to be in man and then they switch to zone or vice versa, the sim pressures up front, blitzing or not blitzing. I mean, all the different things that they do. I mean, the way they value on the back end of the defense of being positionless, where you'll have 5 or 6 defensive backs out there, but you don't exactly know. You know that Marlon Humphrey's a corner, but he might be the nickel. Or that Brandon Stevens is a corner, but he might drop and be a deep safety, depending on what they're doing with their coverage on a given play. So when you do all that, that requires everything to be synchronized, right? That requires everything to be tightened up and everything aligned the right way. And I asked Hamilton, understanding it's a week-to-week league, but in your experience the last few years, whether it was Mike McDonald or now Zach Orr, does that take some time to really get that finely tuned? Because you're talking about new players and new coaches, not just a coordinator, but a couple new position coaches as well. And, he kind of said, look, that's something you never get to a point where you say, all right, we're done building. This is who we are. I mean, you always have a different challenge because different personnel and different matchups that you're going to have over the course of a season. But I think it's inherent to say, yeah, week 1, week 2, week 3, their defense probably won't be quite as good as you expect it to become week 7 or week 8 as you do for it to be week 17, week 18, and in the playoffs. And that goes for Zach Orr or the guys on the field. I mean, I think that, that's kind of a natural progression right there. So, not to make excuses, their defense was not very good for stretches of that game. I mean, let's call a spade a spade. They did some good things at other times, but yeah, just like we were talking about it on the offensive side and just talking about it in general, I want to see a tighter, cleaner performance from the defense, where you don't have a busted coverage. You certainly don't want to see Devontae Adams getting free, downfield or these two tight ends that they have. Obviously they got some nice contributions from Brock Bowers, who was a first round pick, highly touted tight end. So they've got some pieces that can test you. At the same time, Gardner Minshew being behind, in the pocket, under center compared to Patrick Mahomes is a much different. That's a much different challenge, a much easier challenge on paper. I think the biggest thing with Gardner Minshew, and this applied in the past, but watching him operate that Raiders offense in Week 1, he wanted to get the ball out very quickly, and when he did, it looked okay. But when he either couldn't find someone open downfield or he was pressured in the pocket, it did not look good. Like for him, it did not look good. I mean, so the Ravens barely blitz Patrick Mahomes, and that's the MO against him. Everyone knows Mahomes dices up the blitz. I fully expect the Ravens to not necessarily, I'm not saying they're going to blitz on half their defensive snaps, but I think you're going to see them try to dial up pressure and try to really confuse Gardner Minshew because, again, he looked like a quarterback to me that wanted to get rid of the ball as quickly as possible. And look, that's a lot of playing quarterback in today's day and age. So I'm not going to say that that's incredibly unique, but anytime the Chargers were able to pressure him or to force him to, pump or try to extend the play, generally speaking, it did not look very good for them. So I think especially playing at home, hostile environment, crowd noise being more of a factor. That was kind of, that was in LA. There are Raiders fans there. I mean, that's always a weird environment when the Raiders play anywhere out
Well, it's also
that
just
way.
an enormous build. I mean, from a crowd
Yeah.
noise standpoint, that
So
building's not much.
yeah, so certainly this week, I'm sure there'll be a handful of Raiders fans because I mean they're everywhere, right? Cockroaches, they're everywhere. Any NFL market, you're going to find some Raiders fans, but overwhelmingly, it's going to be a partisan crowd, and I think the defense really has an opportunity to get after Gardner Minshew in this game, and Raiders running game, not much to write home about. That did not look very good overall, so certainly expect the Ravens to stop the run. And if you can force Gardner Minshew either to hold the ball, flush him out of the pocket, all the different things that you want to do as a defense, as a pass rush, generally speaking, he's not going to burn you in the way that like Patrick Mahomes broke out and had his big play on that third down at one point. So, it's a way different level of competition here. So yeah, I expect this defense to bounce back and, not predicting a shutout, let's be clear, or anything like that, but I certainly expect them to play better. And I, again, want to see them clean up that communication, break those breakdowns that they had on a few occasions over the course of that game against the Chiefs, which it's going to happen. Kansas City's really good. And you're talking about a Ravens defense that underwent plenty of transition in the offseason. So again, I wasn't shocked by how I saw the defense perform in Week 1.
Luke Jones defecating upon the running game of the Las Vegas Raiders. And, who will pile on that? Chad Wiesling, who was the agent for Josh Jacobs. So we're going to have him on Friday down at Cooper's as part of our Fells Point Oyster Festival. All of our reports from Owings Mills brought to you by our friends at Royal Farms. I see Luke sipping from his Royal Farms coffee right now. We got to have some coffee here with these Orioles games and bullpens. I got Pearl Jam. We got Springsteen sticks, all this stuff going on this weekend. Lamar. Monday, John Harbaugh and his Harbaughlianness, see my injury report, whatever. Meanwhile, the Schefters of the world have to report something. He's banged up. He's a little nicked up. Ran the ball 15 times, which is a dozen too many for me. Lamar, and where are you with Lamar at this point? In this kind of a game where
He's fine. He's not even listed on the injury report. Look, I'm in agreement with you. I don't agree that it's 12 times too many. Lamar Jackson needs to run the ball more than 3 times on average per game. Now, are there certain games where he doesn't have to? Sure. You're asking Superman not to fly. When you say you don't want Lamar to run at all, right? I mean, that doesn't make any sense. That said, No, I don't think him carrying the ball 16 times and taking as many hits as he did in week one is sustainable. I'm in agreement with you on that. So I think we're going to see more Derrick Henry. I think we'll see more Justice Hill running the ball. One thing that I noted, and I know some other people noted, that when you kind of see the split of snaps with Derrick Henry and Justice Hill, it was very almost split. And a lot of that was game situation, right? You're behind, throwing the ball more. Derrick Henry's not has not been a guy that's on the field in obvious passing situations over the course of his career. And, not saying he can't pass block, but that generally hasn't been something that he's been asked to do a whole lot. Same with catching passes out of the backfield. So, but my point with that is if Justice Hill is going to be on the field as much as he was in week one, probably a good idea to get him more than one carry to try not to be too predictable in terms of what your personnel packages are and what that means. So, again, I'm at this point considering his 16 carries were the most that he's had in 3 years. So, yes, he hasn't run the ball nearly as much as he had in the past over the last few years. I think I'm
Well, if the mean
willing
is
to
he
chalk
better
that
run
up
it
to
3 the next 2 weeks to get it down to 8 where you want it to be. How about that?
yeah. I mean, I'll say this: I don't think they think about it in those terms. I think, yeah,
Oh,
you
I
don't
know
want.
they don't, but I'm just saying, like, in a game where they're a 10-point favorite, 9-point favorite, whatever you're gonna go, where we're all just like they're gonna roll the ball out, and I wear my black and white here with my Costas. Raiders are gonna come in and just morning game, like all of that, and it's just gonna be 33-13. It might be, but the only way it's gonna be is the way you're talking about, which is Henry right, Hill left. Andrews for a first down, Henry for 6 yards, Henry for 4 yards, first down. Oh, there's a seam. There's Zay Flowers for 28. Like that's cleaner football than Lamar off tackle or Lamar option, or I don't know. I mean, I don't know where this option seam thing, the sleight of hand thing with Lamar, that was his thing in the beginning. I don't know how much they're going to do that with there. I don't feel like I saw much on Thursday that was successful enough to make me think, oh, that's the way they want to do it. I don't even know how they really want to do it because he ran the ball 16 times. That better not be the way they want to do it. And they don't want to play from behind, but when they do, how are they going to play? And how are they going to keep the sticks moving every 4 plays and 10 yards if Derrick Henry's not the guy doing it?
They've got to be more successful as an operation. I mean, Derrick Henry, sure, I'd love to see Derrick Henry have more than 13 carries, but he averaged 3.5 yards a carry. Your offensive line has to block. I mean, it's that simple. So I'm in agreement with you, and I mentioned this that, I want to see maybe some more read option, and that's something that's a moving target, right? Just like I was talking a few minutes ago about the defense and some of the new pieces. Again, Derrick Henry did not play in a shotgun heavy offense in Tennessee over the duration of his tenure there. It was much more under center. Now, did we see the Ravens under center more in week one than we've seen in the past? Sure, but still very shotgun pistol heavy in terms of how they run. And that's not to say Derrick Henry can't do that. I'm not
You think under
suggesting that.
center is a bad idea for Lamar?
I I mean, I don't think it's a bad idea. I
I
just
mean, you and
think,
I have never discussed whether this is round and square pegs. Like literally, I mean, this is the first time like you've just thrown it out there that
with Derrick Henry, I've talked about
we've
that.
talked
I've talked
about
about
it,
that.
but from a functional standpoint, we have a game this week, and the one last week didn't work. Against a great team and this is a good front seven. This is
Yeah, I mean, they
certainly an
didn't block.
adequate.
That was the biggest problem. They
Well,
didn't
right, and
block.
and that's the part of this that if that doesn't work, you can have Superman and fly and you into kryptonite, and you can have Derrick Henry run into the Hall of Fame, but you can't get him past the line of scrimmage. You can have Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely line up and get out there, but you can't protect Lamar enough that he's not running around and playing the scramble game. Like I just went through some nightmares, but we saw it all last Thursday, and they're 0-1. And the nightmare is 16 runs for Lamar. Derrick Henry's running game didn't work. The passing game was whatever a detractor of Lamar would say, and he didn't have any time. Like, last week's problematic if somehow they struggle this week. We'll start to look at this thing differently, especially with Dallas, Buffalo, and Cincinnati over the hill to say, when are we going to see this work? If this doesn't work this week, when is it going to work from a control the game, control the ball, do what you want to do what you think you brought him in to do? And I don't know whether that means pistol or under. I don't know because it is a little round and square. It is a little, if you have one, how do you have the other, and how do you make the chocolate and the peanut butter work together?
Well, and that's where it's just like anything else. I mean, over the course of a season, you want to get more comfortable with it, and that's not to say they can't do it. You know, it's not to say it won't be successful at all, but you've got to do it, and there's an adjustment in the same way that I mentioned the defense. You know, with a new coordinator, and new position coaches, and new players on the field, and new guys in sub packages. There's always some questions about how cohesive it's going to be, how calibrated it's going to be. I mean, that's human nature, right? I mean, I think you look at in most cases where you're talking about complicated operations that it's going to take some time. You know, I said it before the game. I've talked about this. I've written about this. That I wouldn't have been surprised if the running game looked choppy in week one. I wouldn't be surprised if it looks choppy in week two. I want to see less choppy, right? I want to see the degree of choppy to look better because
Well, the penalties and down and distance are trouble. You know, like just no
sure.
penalties. Let's start with that. No
Yeah.
penalties, because that's the beginning of it.
Well, and I think the whole illegal. First of all, I'm so tired of hearing about the illegal formation thing. I think this is this year's point of emphasis in the NFL, and 2 weeks from now, we're not even going to be talking about it. You know, illegal contact was that a few years ago. There have been some years where pass interference was more of a point of emphasis. I mean, the league for, I don't know, it feels like in the way that some people decide that, you know, management or people that are in positions of power feel like they need to do something just to for the sake of doing it to make it look like they're, you know, to
Take away a
justify
guy's media credential or thing like that. Just little things like that. Yes.
But the point, you know, with that, you know, I don't think Ronnie Stanley's going to continue to be called for 3 illegal formation penalties per game. You know, I think that's all going to be cleaned up. I think that was a very bizarre aberration, you know, very bizarre aberration and outlier because it was the first game and because it was a point of emphasis in the offseason for teams. So, you know, beyond that, you know, they didn't have, it's not like they had a ton of back-breaking penalties, but that was like the big one that, you know, they had what, 3 on that first drive where they ended up getting a touchdown. It was kind of miraculous that they overcame that. But, you know,
but they did make an example out of him. They did.
Sure. Oh, there's no doubt, especially when you look at, you know, some of the alignment of, you know, Kansas City's tackles, you know, kind of looking at it like that. It was bizarre. It was. But again, I don't think that's going to be a major topic of discussion moving forward. I think you're going to see that fade into the background again. And look, Ronnie Stanley in the past would be called for that every now and then. Tackles do like to set further back. I mean, they do. It makes pass protection easier. So, you know, he's got to move up a little bit. There's no doubt about it. So, but I think with this offensive line, you know, you want to see some growth. You want to see improvement from week 1 to week 2. As I said to you upon review, and it was interesting even to see, you know, some of the different sites that try to grade, you know, ESPN has pass blocking win rate. Pro Football Focus has long had their grades, and look, none of them are gospel because none of them have a full degree of certainty in terms of what a player's assignment is. But I think collectively, if you kind of look at the consensus, it's that the Ravens in pass protection, while far from perfect, was better than their run blocking and got better as the night went on, whereas the run blocking just didn't look very good over the course of the night. So that's where you're looking for the growth, right? I mean, certainly you want pass protection to continue to take a step forward, and you want to jump from your run blocking. There's no doubt about that. So, you know, but this is a talented front. I mean, they've got multiple players on this front that can pose matchup problems. I mean, Christian Wilkins going up against Daniel Faalele, that's a concern. You know, Voorhees, who played better than Faalele in the opener, going up against Wilkins, you know, that's a potential concern. So Max Crosby going up against either tackle, and that's even fully acknowledging that Ronnie Stanley was, penalties aside, was actually quite good against the Chiefs. From a blocking standpoint, that's still a challenge. So yeah, it's a new challenge this week, and that's why, while I fully expect the Ravens to go out there and win because they're the better team, but they've got to go out and do it. And you do want to see growth from week 1 to week 2. And yes, I'm in full agreement. While I'm not of the thought whatsoever that I'm going to tell Lamar Jackson not to run, I certainly don't want him running 16 times and taking as many hits as he did in week 1. But again, I'll chalk that up to opponent, AFC title game hangover, national spotlight, and the fact that not a whole lot else was working. You know, everything else was very choppy, and Lamar scrambling works great. To your point, when it's really, when it's, cutthroat time, that's their best play because he's the best quarterback in the history of the league to do that. And yes, I fully think better than Michael Vick, better than Randall Cunningham, go down the list in that way. But yeah, you don't want that to be all you're doing or all you can do. No question about that. So yeah, you want to get the schemed up running game going, the design running game you want to get going. And yeah, you can mix in a couple of more runs here and there on that. There's no question, no problem with that. Again, that would be dumb to eliminate that. But yeah, you don't want to have to rely on it, right? You want to be in a position where, Derrick Henry is involved, Justice Hill is involved. You want to get Mark Andrews going. Look, Isaiah Likely, what he did was great. That was fantastic. But Mark Andrews did next to nothing. So you want to see him, look like Mark Andrews, right? And look like he's healthy and all of that. You don't overreact to week one, but you want to see better there. Zay Flowers, he had the catches, but what? Zay Flowers ended up, receiving yard wise, did not do a whole lot in that game. It was a lot of underneath stuff. I'd like to see them be able to push the ball downfield to Zay Flowers a little bit more than what we saw in the opener. So again, it's all about progress. Their offense wasn't bad against Kansas City, but it was a very choppy, inconsistent, lack of rhythm kind of operation for much of the night. I mean, really, other than the 2-minute situations where they ended up getting a lot of their yardage, at times it was very frustrating. So, you want to see growth against a team that is not the Kansas City Chiefs, right? I mean, that's obvious. So go out there again, start fast, get yourself a lead, be balanced on offense. And then if you have that lead in the second half, that's when you can really start to lean into Derrick Henry and do what everyone talked about them doing back in March when they signed him. So, ultimately, I think they're going to do that. I don't think it'll necessarily be a perfect performance, but again, I think the Ravens are just better in just about every phase that if you want to try to break it down, they're certainly more talented. They're way better at the quarterback position. They have more talent on defense, although the Raiders do have a good front, and that's going to be a challenge for this O-line, no doubt about it, but the Ravens should win. And yes, I'll go back to my throwaway line in the midst of our conversation about the Orioles in another segment. They better win, because if you're talking about somehow losing this football game and being 0-2, then going to Dallas and then coming home and playing a primetime game against Buffalo, and I get it, the Bills are diminished on paper, but hey, they still have Josh Allen, and he still looked really good at the end of that game in that comeback win against Arizona. And then you have Cincinnati after that, who I still think is going a better team than what we saw in week one. So, you never want to start 0-2. It's not season over, but 0-2, you're I don't know if you're pressing the panic button, but you're asking where it is at the very least.
Well, we better be doing happy radio here Monday. I mean, Orioles aside, however that goes in Detroit this weekend. And then we got the Yankees next, coming up in Dallas and the Yankees the week after. Like, this is a big month here, dude. I mean, it just doesn't get – and on the grandest of stages, you can't wake up 0-2 on Monday. But, I mean, that would – as I sit here, that's got to feel unthinkable.
Sure. Sure. At the same time, they were saying the same thing in Cincinnati on Sunday morning, going up against the Patriots. And again, I still think the Bengals are a good team. I think they will be. I think, I'm wrong plenty of times too. Who knows? But, they laid an egg at home against a team with a brand new head coach, and, they can run the ball and play defense. The Raiders can't really run the ball, I don't think. But they are certainly they're a professional football outfit that if you kick the ball around and don't play well, and you have protection breakdowns that cause your quarterback to cough up the football, or you throw the ball to the other team, or you give up a special teams, big return, or, things like that, busted coverages, you do things like that, then yeah, there'll be a 3-point game in the fourth quarter. And Gardner Minshew and the Colts last September reminded that, the Ravens can certainly be beaten at home if they don't play their best football, but I expect this team to come out and play good football. I don't think it's going to be perfect. Again, there's still elements of this football team that are a work in progress, but I still think at the end of the day, they're better than the Raiders, and they better show it. I think they will.
He is Baltimore Luke out on the interwebs. He is Luke Jones. He is doing baseball and football double duty all weekend long. Orioles stay out on the road, and the Ravens are home. And I'm going to get JT the Brick on. We've got great programming here this week. Lawrence Gowan from Sticks checked in. Nils Lofgren from the E Street Band put a bunch of stuff on. Mark Viviano was here earlier in the week with Rasig, and just good stuff. We're doing the Maryland Oyster Tour each and every day, having an oyster a day, 26 ways for 26 days. Our 26th anniversary logo will be launched on Monday as well. Hopefully the Ravens are 1-1 and launching that. Boy, what else I don't even know what else we have going on here. Oh, Springsteen's in town too, and Pearl Jam's in town, and Styx is in town. So big rock and roll weekend, big weekend at home. Oyster Festival down at Fells Point. Come down, music all weekend. Great oysters because the month has an R in it. I can show you some creative ways to eat them as well. And the Crab Cake Tour is back out on the road next Friday. We are at Fadley's after we're at Cooper's on this Friday. He's Luke. I'm Nestor. Ravens begin at 1 o'clock on Sunday. We'll have full coverage during the game, after the game, and again on Monday morning. I'm Nestor. He's Luke. We're WNST AM 1570 Towson, Baltimore. We never stop talking Baltimore positive.